It was supposed to be the day everything changed, the day the Hartley family finally walked away from a lifetime of debt, uncertainty, and long winters, praying the farm would survive one more season. The small town of Maple Ridge had never seen so many people outside its old brick law office. Neighbors lingered on the sidewalk, pretending to check their phones while stealing glances at the woman standing at the foot of the steps. Claire Hartley, 32, in a simple blue dress and worn leather boots that still carried dust from her family's land. Camera crews from the local station had shown up, too. Third-generation farmer sells land to big developer was the kind of headline that stirred emotions around here. Claire smoothed the front of her dress with trembling hands. Tucked into her bag were documents that promised a fresh start, enough money to pay off medical bills, her late father's debts, and maybe even send her younger brother back to college. "All you have to do is sign," she whispered to herself. Behind her, the town buzzed. Cars rolling past, a distant siren wailing, the rustle of leaves in the autumn wind. And then the buzz cracked, because halfway up the courthouse steps, blocking the entrance with muscles coiled and fur bristling, stood a mud-splattered Border Collie mix named Daisy, her dog, the one who'd chased crows off their crops since she was a puppy, the one who'd slept by her father's bed on the nights when the pain in his chest got worse. Now Daisy stood rigid, chest heaving, eyes locked not on Claire, but on the glass door of the law office, and the suited man waiting inside with a briefcase in his hand. "Daisy," Claire called, her voice cracking. The dog's ears twitched at her name, but she didn't move. A low growl rolled from her throat. Quiet at first, then louder when the man inside stepped closer to the door. "Ma'am, is that your dog?" The receptionist called nervously from behind the glass. Before Claire could answer, the door swung open. Gavin Cole, the developer with the easy smile and polished shoes, stepped into the doorway, his lawyer at his shoulder, the black briefcase resting casually in his grip. "Well," he said, forcing a chuckle, "looks like someone doesn't want to let you in." Daisy's growl deepened. She bared her teeth, not at Claire, but at him. Gas fluttered through the crowd. "Daisy, stop it," Claire pleaded, taking a step toward her. "It's okay. Girl, we talked about this. We're just signing papers." But the dog didn't back down. When Gavin shifted his weight, Daisy lunged forward, teeth snapping inches from the briefcase. "Hey!" he shouted, jerking it back. The lawyer swore under his breath. A sheriff's deputy nearby reached instinctively for his belt. "Control your dog," Gavin snapped, eyes flashing, "or somebody will get hurt." But Claire's heart wasn't racing because Daisy growled. It was racing because she'd seen that look in her dog's eyes before. The sharp, focused stare that meant danger, even when nobody else sensed it. The last time Daisy had looked like that, a storm drain had collapsed beneath the tractor Claire was driving. And the time before that, her father had collapsed on the barn floor, clutching his chest. Daisy had known before anyone else. Now, on the very day Claire planned to sign away her family's land forever, Daisy was blocking the door like it was a cliff edge. And what Claire was about to discover inside that briefcase wouldn't just change the fate of the Hartley farm, it would expose a secret that could have stolen her entire future. The sun rose slowly over Hartley farm, turning the fields into a patchwork of gold and bronze. Mist clung to the low spots like memory that refused to lift. From the old farmhouse on the hill, the land stretched as far as Claire could see. Rows of corn stubble, the faded red barn, the weather-beaten silo leaning slightly to one side. She'd grown up with this view. It was the first thing she saw when she pressed her forehead against her bedroom window as a child, watching her father head out before dawn. It was the last thing she saw on the night he died, the ambulance lights flashing across the same fields he'd spent his life tending. This had been her grandfather's land, and his father's before that. But by the time it reached Claire, it didn't look like an inheritance. It looked like a weight. She stood in the kitchen that morning, coffee cradled in both hands, staring at the stack of manila envelopes spread across the table. Bank letters, hospital bills, notices with big red stamps that said "past due." Beside them lay a single sleek folder with a developer's logo on it. Crisp, clean, out of place among the smudged papers of farm life. "Claire?" her younger brother Ben called from the hallway. "They're here." She took a breath and forced her shoulders back. Today, today she would sign the paperwork that would sell off the last 80 acres of Hartley land. Today she would stop fearing the mailbox, the phone calls, the knock on the door in the middle of the night. "Coming," she said, though part of her wanted to slam the back door, run into the farthest field, and sink into the soil. She stepped outside. The autumn air smelled of rain and cut hay. A black pickup truck waited in the gravel driveway, glossy and out of place. Standing beside it, adjusting his cuffs, was Gavin Cole, the man who'd appeared 2 months ago with brochures filled with glass-fronted houses and smiling families. He'd walked the property with her, talked about potential and fair offers, nodded when she explained that after her father's heart attack, she'd tried to run the farm alone. "You've done more than most could," he'd said, voice gentle. "But land can work for you now. Take the payout, clear the debts, start fresh." Behind him stood Mark Jennings, his local attorney. Gray suit, gray eyes, a handshake that felt like an agreement before any words were spoken. They smiled when they saw her. "Morning, Ms. Hartley," Mark said. "Big day." "Yeah," she replied, swallowing. "Big day." Something brushed against her leg. She looked down. Daisy sat at her heel, black and white fur ruffled by the breeze, amber eyes fixed not on her, but on the 2 men by the truck. The Border Collie mix had been astray at first. A skinny, nervous thing that showed up the year Claire turned 20. Her father had tried to shoo her away, but the dog kept coming back, tail low, eyes hopeful, until the night the storm broke the old fence and half the cattle bolted toward the creek. Daisy had sprung into action like she'd been born to that land, circling the herd, barking, pushing them away from the ravine. She'd saved half their stock in a single night. "Guess she's chosen us," her father had grumbled afterward, scratching Daisy behind the ears. "Every farm needs a good dog." Since then, Daisy had become part of the family. Chasing chickens out of the road, trailing Ben down the driveway to the school bus, curling up beside Claire's father's recliner when his health began to fail. She knew every creak of the porch, every scent on the wind. And this morning, she knew something else. Her ears were pinned back. Her body was tense. Her gaze had the same sharp intensity it wore in storms, when the sky turned green and the wind changed. "Relax, girl," Claire whispered, reaching down to rub her chest. "It's just paperwork." Daisy's nose twitched. She didn't look at Claire. She stared at Gavin. When he stepped forward, briefcase in hand, Daisy let out a low, steady growl. Gavin paused, forcing a chuckle. "Guess somebody's not sure about me," he said lightly. "Can't say I blame her. Dogs don't like change." The lawyer smiled thinly. "Ms. Hartley, the documents are already at my office. We'll review them once more, then sign. You'll walk out debt-free." Debt-free. The words felt like cold water and warm sunlight all at once. Claire took a breath and nodded. "Okay, let's do it." She turned toward the truck. Daisy moved with her. When Claire reached for the passenger door, Daisy planted herself in front of it, blocking the way. Her nails scraped the gravel as she braced, chest out, eyes wide. "Daisy, move," Claire murmured. The dog didn't budge. "What's her deal?" Ben asked, coming down the stairs, tugging on his jacket. "She's protective," Claire said, trying to laugh. Gavin opened the rear door instead. "She's welcome to ride in back," he said. "Might calm her down to come along." Daisy flicked her ears at his voice. Then, startling everyone, she stepped backward, away from the truck, and sat down firmly in the middle of the driveway. Directly in the path they'd have to take to leave, as if she knew, as if she were saying, "Don't go." The trip into town wasn't long. 15 minutes down a 2-lane road lined with turning maples. But it felt like an hour. Daisy ended up jumping into Ben's old pickup instead. When Claire slammed the passenger door of Gavin's truck, the dog had launched herself into the back of Ben's with a resolve that made the choice for them. "She's coming whether we like it or not," Ben had said. "Might as well let her." Now, as the Hartley siblings followed the developer's shiny truck toward Maple Ridge, the farm grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Claire watched it disappear, feeling like she was watching her father's hands fade with it. The calloused fingers that had closed around her own when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. The hand that had rested on Daisy's head the night he told her, "If anything ever feels wrong, you listen to this dog. She knows this land better than both of us combined." Beside her, Daisy lay on the seat, head on Claire's thigh, but she wasn't relaxed. Every time the truck ahead of them slowed, Daisy's ears shot up. Every time the wind shifted through the cracked window, she lifted her head and sniffed sharply, nostrils flaring. "What's wrong with her?" Ben muttered. "She's usually drooling over drive-through smells by now." Claire forced a smile, running her fingers through the dog's fur. "Maybe she knows," she whispered. "Knows what?" "That we're not coming back the same." Ben's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Hey," he said, "you're doing what you have to. Dad left us with a mess. Selling the back 80 doesn't mean we're selling him." "I know," she said, but her chest ached. They passed the rusted sign that marked the town limits. Maple Ridge rolled out ahead. A main street with a diner, a hardware store, a barber shop that still used a striped pole. At the far end of the street rose the brick building that housed the law offices of Jennings and Cole. As they pulled onto the square, Daisy suddenly stood up, paws braced on the dashboard, her gaze locked on the building's second floor. Claire had seen Daisy like this in the fields. When she caught the scent of a coyote or heard the faintest rumble of distant thunder long before a storm appeared. "Easy, girl," she murmured. Daisy whined, shifting her weight, tail stiff. Gavin's truck parked in front of the office. As he and Mark stepped out, adjusting their ties, Daisy emitted a growl so low it vibrated through the seat. "Whoa," Ben said softly. "That's not like her." Claire swallowed. It wasn't like any of this. Her father's voice echoed again in her memory. "Dogs don't talk, but if you pay attention, they'll tell you everything." She opened the truck door. Daisy sprang out before her feet even touched the ground. The dog landed in a crouch, eyes locked on the two men. "Stay close," Claire whispered. Daisy obeyed. But not the way Claire expected. She stayed so close that as Claire walked behind Gavin and Mark, Daisy's shoulder brushed her leg with every step. Her body angled slightly toward the men, always between them and her human, like a shield. The first warning had come weeks before. Claire hadn't seen it then. She saw it now, replaying in the back of her mind as they crossed the sidewalk. It had been a Tuesday evening when Gavin first came to the farm. He'd stepped out of his truck in his crisp white shirt, shoes too clean for a gravel driveway. He talked about market values and zoning changes with a charm that made everything sound like opportunity. "We can keep the old farmhouse as a heritage piece," he'd said. "You'd still have a place here, Ms. Hartley. We're not erasing your family. We're honoring them." Daisy had watched him from the porch that day. When he'd extended his hand to Claire, the dog had trotted down the steps, sniffed his pants, and sneezed, backing away, lips twitching in what looked like a silent snarl. "Sorry," Claire had said, embarrassed. "She's usually friendlier." "It's fine," he'd replied smoothly. "Guess she's not ready for change yet." Then there'd been the time last week when Mark had visited alone with a stack of papers. Daisy had stood in the doorway, hackles raised, eyes locked on the slim leather folio in his hands. "That dog's got opinions," he'd joked, tapping the folder. "Maybe she's worried we'll miss something." If only Claire had listened. Now, as they neared the law office door, Daisy's steps slowed. She stared at the brass handle, nose twitching, ears pricked. Gavin turned, his smile thin. "Ready?" he asked. Claire opened her mouth to say yes. Daisy made the choice for her. With a sudden burst of movement, the dog surged forward, planting herself on the top step in front of the door. Her paws scraped the stone. Her body went rigid. She growled, not the playful rumble she used on squirrels, the low, serious growl she'd used the night a stranger's truck had idled too long at the end of their driveway. Lights off, engine quiet. "Daisy!" Claire hissed, grabbing for her collar. The dog yanked free, eyes locked on the dark-tinted glass as if she could see something no one else could. From inside, through the glass, the receptionist stared, hand hovering over the phone. A sheriff's deputy who'd been grabbing coffee at the diner across the street walked over, frowning. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" he asked. She's just nervous, Claire said quickly. She doesn't like offices. It sounded ridiculous, even as she said it. Gavin shifted the briefcase to his other hand and stepped forward. Daisy's growl turned into a bark. Loud, sharp, echoing off the storefronts. She lunged, teeth snapping inches from the black leather case. "Whoa!" the deputy shouted, stepping between them. "Control your dog!" Mark snapped, eyes flashing. Daisy didn't try to bite anyone's skin. She fixated on the briefcase, snapping, snarling, as if the object itself offended her. The deputy held out a hand. "Easy there," he said. "Ma'am, you might want to leave her outside." Claire's cheeks burned. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown. Neighbors, curious strangers, people who knew her father, all watching. The last thing she needed was Daisy making a scene. She stepped forward, voice cracking. "Daisy, heel." The dog looked at her. Really looked at her. With eyes full of something that made Claire's breath catch. Fear, not for herself, for Claire. Then, slowly, Daisy backed down one step. Her body trembled. She sat, but her gaze never left the briefcase. "Good girl," Claire whispered, heart pounding. "We'll be quick." Gavin forced a laugh, shoulders stiff. "Quite the guard dog," he said. "Maybe after all this, you should send her to work for me." Daisy's lip curled. If dogs spoke our language, Claire thought, she had a feeling Daisy would have had a very different answer. The office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting rectangles of pale gold on the floor. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with binders and framed certificates. A long oak table dominated the center of the room. At one end lay a neat stack of documents. At the other, a silver tray with coffee and glasses of water. "Please, have a seat," Mark said, gesturing toward the chairs. Ben hovered near the corner, awkward in a borrowed button-down shirt. Daisy lay on the floor beside Claire's chair, head on her paws, eyes steadily following every movement Gavin made. The briefcase sat on the table, locked, waiting. Mark adjusted his glasses and flipped through the first document. "So, as we discussed," he began, "this is the purchase agreement for 80 acres of Hartley Farm. In exchange for the agreed sum, your family relinquishes all claims to the property, including mineral rights." Daisy's ears twitched. Mineral rights. The phrase passed over Claire like a breeze. She didn't know much about legal terms. All she knew was that the number at the bottom of the page was enough to clear everything. To start again, she picked up the pen. Her hands shook. Daisy's head shot up. The dog stared at the paper, then at Gavin, then at the black briefcase. Her whole body went tense. "Relax," Ben whispered, rubbing Daisy's back. "It's just paper, girl." But Daisy's gaze said something else. No, not just paper. Mark slid a second page toward them. "This is the Declaration of Disclosure," he said. "Standard procedure." Claire tried to focus, but the words swam. As condition, waiver, relinquishment, indemnify. The room felt smaller. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, hoarse and tired in his hospital bed. "If you ever sign anything about this land, don't do it alone. Get someone you trust." But the only someone she trusted was lying on the floor at her feet. The pen pressed against the line. Daisy shot to her feet so fast her claws scratched the hardwood. She stepped sideways, bumping the table with her shoulder. The water glasses rattled. One tipped, spilling a clear sheet of water across the pristine papers. "Hey!" Mark snapped, jerking them back. "Control your animal." "I'm sorry," Claire said quickly, grabbing napkins from the tray. "She's..." The deputy from outside appeared in the doorway. "You folks all right in here?" he asked. "We heard some barking." "We're fine," Gavin said through clenched teeth. "Just a jumpy dog." Daisy ignored the deputy. She stood rigid, nose pointed at the briefcase like a compass arrow. Her hackles rose. "Ms. Hartley," Mark said, forcing his voice calm, "if we could please continue." He clicked open the briefcase. In that instant, Daisy exploded. With a snarl that made everyone in the room flinch, she lunged forward, front paws slamming onto the table. Papers flew. The silver tray clattered to the floor. The briefcase tipped as Daisy's teeth closed around its edge. "Get her off!" Gavin shouted. The deputy sprang forward. Ben grabbed for Daisy's collar, but the dog was faster. With a violent jerk of her head, she ripped the briefcase from the table. It burst open as it hit the floor, scattering not just contract copies, but a second, thinner stack of documents bound with a red clip, in a small, black flash drive that skittered across the hardwood and came to rest against the deputy's boot. The room froze. Gavin went pale. "That's enough," the deputy said sharply, bending to pick up the flash drive. "What's this?" "Just backups," Gavin stammered. "No need to make a big deal out of." Daisy growled, her body positioned between Claire and the men, eyes blazing. Claire's pulse hammered. "Backups of what?" she whispered. Mark reached toward the scattered red-bound stack. The deputy was quicker. He scooped them up, flipping through them with a frown. "Mr. Cole," he said slowly, brow furrowing. "This looks like a second agreement. Different buyer name, different price." The air turned heavy. Ben stepped closer to his sister. "What?" he breathed. The deputy scanned the lines, lips moving silently. "It says here," he murmured, "that the mineral rights are severed from the land and transferred to Coal Development Holdings at no additional cost." He lifted his head. His eyes were sharp now. "Ms. Hartley," he said carefully, "did you know about this second document?" Claire shook her head, numb. No," she whispered. "I've never seen those." Mark cleared his throat. "There's no need to involve law enforcement," he said quickly. "These are preliminary drafts. Nothing binding. We were simply—" The deputy's gaze hardened. "They're dated yesterday," he said, "and they're stamped with the county recorder's seal." Claire's knees went weak. "The county," she began. Her throat closed. Gavin's mask cracked. "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, there's a secondary arrangement. Standard business. You're still getting your fair share." The deputy's hand dropped to his radio. "I think," he said, "we should get the county clerk up here. And maybe someone from the state attorney's office." Daisy barked once. A single, piercing sound that cut through the rising chaos like a bell. Not an attack, an alert, exactly like the bark she'd used the night smoke began to seep from the oven door. The bark that had saved their kitchen from burning down. Within 20 minutes, the quiet law office felt more like a crime scene. The county clerk arrived first, red-faced and flustered, clutching his satchel. "I was told there's an issue with some filings?" he asked. The deputy handed him the red-bound stack and the flash drive. "We found these in Mr. Cole's briefcase," he said. "Ms. Hartley claims she's never seen them." The clerk adjusted his glasses, eyes darting over the pages. "This," he muttered, flipping faster. "This is a mineral rights transfer, filed under expedited processing, effective immediately upon signature." He looked at Claire, then back at the document. "This would have stripped you of all underground resources on your land," he said quietly. "Separate from the sale of the surface property, any gas, oil, or other reserves discovered later would belong entirely to Coal Development, even if the surface sale fell through." Claire felt like the ground had shifted under her. "Gas? Oil?" Ben stammered. "We don't have anything like that." The clerk winced. "Actually," he said slowly, "there are exploratory surveys in this county, early stage, but promising enough that mineral rights are becoming more valuable every quarter." Gavin's jaw clenched. "It's speculation," he said sharply. "Nothing's guaranteed. We were just protecting our investment." "By taking theirs," the deputy replied. Mark spread his hands. "Let's not be dramatic," he said. "The Hartleys were still receiving a fair market value for their property. The additional documents were hidden in a separate file, Mom," the deputy cut in. "Filed without their knowledge." He turned to Claire. "Did anyone tell you," he asked, "that your land might sit over potential reserves?" "No," she whispered. Her voice sounded small in her own ears. "Nobody told me anything beyond Debt relief. A fresh start. The clerk's mouth tightened. This is fraud, he said. It's business, Gavin snapped. Do you have any idea what kind of pressure I'm under? I have investors breathing down my neck, loans tied to projects just like this. The bank doesn't care that her daddy died or that she cries over cornfields at night. They care about numbers, returns. His gaze flicked to Daisy, who stood between him and Claire, tail stiff, eyes bright. And that stupid dog just blew up the cleanest out I had. Daisy's growl rumbled like distant thunder. The deputy moved closer to Gavin. Mr. Cole, he said, voice steely, you need to stop talking. Gavin laughed, but there was no humor in it. What? He said. You're going to haul me away because I tried to make a profit off land that was practically sinking them? Off a woman too sentimental to realize she's drowning? Claire swallowed hard. I knew, she said quietly. I knew we were drowning. She reached down, fingers tangling in Daisy's fur. But you didn't throw us a rope. You cut a hole in the lifeboat and hoped we wouldn't notice until you'd sailed off with the engine. For a moment, the room was silent. Gavin's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly smaller, less like the untouchable man in the brochures, and more like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't set out to hurt you, he muttered. I have my own creditors, my own promises. If I don't make this work, I lose everything, too. He looked at the red-bound stack. I thought, if I got those rights locked up, I could flip them to a bigger company, pay off my loans, keep the project afloat. You'd still have walked away with a fair payout. He lifted his hands helplessly. I told myself it was victimless. The deputy shook his head. Nothing is victimless when you hide the truth, he said. Daisy barked. Short, sharp, an exclamation point. Claire drew a long, shaky breath. Her father's voice hummed in the back of her mind. There will always be folks who see this land as numbers on a page. But to us, it's more. It's every storm we survived, every harvest we scraped together. Don't ever let someone tell you those memories aren't worth anything. She looked around the room. At the scattered papers, the spilled water, the black briefcase on its side like a toppled throne. At Daisy, standing steady despite the tension. At least one of us still believes that, she said softly, hand resting on Daisy's head. The deputy stepped closer to Gavin. Mr. Cole, he said, pulling a pair of cuffs from his belt. You're under investigation for attempted fraud and filing falsified documents. You have the right to remain silent. Mark sputtered, demanding a phone call, promising this would be cleared up quickly. The county clerk began gathering the documents with furious care, as if each page might crumble if handled too roughly. Through it all, Daisy didn't move. She stayed by Claire's side, her body a quiet, unflinching line of courage between her human and the man who'd nearly stolen her future with the stroke of a pen. The news spread faster than rain over dry ground. By evening, every diner stool in Maple Ridge was taken. Every booth was full. The TV mounted in the corner of Hartley's diner. The very place Claire's grandparents had once celebrated their engagement. Replayed the local news segment on a loop. Farm dog uncovers secret deal. Saves family's land, the headline read. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Daisy standing on the courthouse steps, fur bristling, eyes blazing. The reporter's voice narrated over the scene. Witnesses say the dog, a Border Collie mix named Daisy, repeatedly blocked her owner, Claire Hartley, from entering the law office where a land sale was set to take place. Once inside, Daisy lunged at the developer's briefcase, exposing a second set of documents and a flash drive that revealed a hidden mineral rights transfer. Ms. Hartley claims she never agreed to. In the corner booth, Claire watched the loop for the third time, her untouched coffee cooling in front of her. Ben sat across from her, turning his mug in his hands. You okay? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. She felt hollow and full at the same time, furious and relieved, grieving and grateful. You saved the farm, he said. Or, Daisy did, but still. She looked out the diner window, toward the distant silhouette of their land. Did we? She murmured. Or did we just postpone the inevitable? Debt didn't disappear because someone else got caught being greedy. The hospital bills still sat in a pile on the kitchen table. The tractors still needed repairs. The crops still needed planting with money they didn't have. But something had changed. Not on the land. In her, the bell above the diner door jingled. The local reporter. A young woman in a blazer, slightly too big for her shoulders, walked in, camera crew behind her. "Ms. Hartley?" she asked gently. "Do you have a moment?" Claire stiffened. I'm not sure I have anything else to say," she replied. Daisy, who'd been lying quietly under the table, lifted her head and wagged her tail once, slow and steady. Her eyes met Claire's, warm and patient, as if to say, "You've been telling this land story your whole life. You can share this one, too." The reporter smiled. "It doesn't have to be about the fraud," she said. "We've already got that part. I'd like to talk about her." She nodded toward Daisy. "About what she did for you." Outside, they sat up under the fading light. The world was turning gold again, the same way it had the morning Claire had left the farm, unsure if she'd ever look at it the same way. Now she stood in front of the camera, hands tucked into her jacket pockets, Daisy pressed firmly against her leg. The red light blinked on. 3, 2, 1. "We're live in 5, the cameraman said. The reporter smiled softly. "Claire," she began, "people are calling Daisy a hero. What do you think?" Claire looked down at the dog, at the dirt still clinging to her paws from tearing across the fields to leap into Ben's truck, at the fur along her spine, still slightly raised at the memory of the law office. "She is," Claire said simply, "but not just because she stopped a bad deal." She lifted her gaze to the camera. "Daisy has been warning me for a long time," she continued. "Every time I tried to ignore how wrong everything felt, she reminded me. The way she wouldn't take treats from Mr. Cole's hand, the way she paced the floor when I'd stay up late staring at those contracts. I thought she was just anxious. Turns out, she was paying attention to things I wasn't." She exhaled, the breath trembling. "People think she just saved our land," she said. "But she did more than that. She saved me from signing away the last piece of my father I had left, without knowing what I was really losing." Her hand curled in Daisy's fur. "She can't read contracts," Claire added with a faint smile. "But she reads people. She knew something was wrong long before I did." The reporter nodded, eyes shining. "And what would you say," she asked, "to people watching who think dogs are just pets?" Claire smiled, soft and sad and full. "I'd say they're wrong," she replied. "They're family. They're guardians. They're the ones who stay when everything else falls apart. Daisy didn't just protect our farm. She protected the part of me that still believes this land can be more than a line in someone else's ledger." The camera cut. The segment would air that night, be clipped and shared online, travel far beyond Maple Ridge. But the most important listener was already right beside her, leaning against her leg, tail thumping once, as if in agreement. The days that followed felt like the quiet after a storm. The sky cleared, but the ground still soaked. The damage still counted. Investigators from the state came and went, asking questions, taking copies of documents, poring over emails pulled from Gavin's servers. "Will he go to prison?" Ben asked one night, stacking firewood by the back door. "Maybe," Claire said. "Maybe not. That's up to people who get paid a lot more than we do." Truth be told, she didn't know what she wanted for him. She thought about his face in that office. Not just angry, but desperate. The way his hands had shaken. The way his voice had broke when he'd said, "I lose everything, too." Hurt people, hurting others, desperate people, making desperate choices. That didn't excuse what he tried to do, but it made him human. Her father had always said you could judge a person by how they treated your land, and your dog. Gavin had tried to trick one and sneered at the other. That was enough. One afternoon, the county clerk drove out to the farm himself. "I wanted to apologize," he said, hat in hand. "Those filings should never have been processed without your signature. Procedures were bypassed. We're tightening things." He held out a file. "In here," he said, "is a full copy of your deed, your mineral rights, your water rights, everything that's still yours. Maybe it's not worth millions today, Maybe it never will be, but it's yours. Claire took the folder, fingers brushing the embossed seal. Thank you, she said quietly. As he left, Daisy watched from the porch, eyes bright, tail swishing slowly. That evening, Claire spread the documents across the kitchen table, the same place she'd once spread overdue bills and glossy brochures. She traced the lines of the property description with her finger, the coordinates, the boundaries. Her father's handwriting still covered the margins from an old survey, faint but visible. In the corner of her eye, she saw motion. Daisy hopped onto the chair beside her and rested her chin on the table's edge, eyes scanning the papers like a second set of guardians. Claire laughed softly. Yeah, she murmured. We're going to read everything from now on, aren't we? Daisy let out a low, contented woof. Later, as the sun sank behind the barn, Claire sat on the porch steps, a blanket over her legs. The fields glowed in the amber light, stubble catching fire in the last rays of the day. Daisy lay beside her, head resting on her boot. You know, Claire said, voice quiet, I spent months telling myself selling the land was the only way to survive, that if I kept holding on, I was being foolish, stubborn, sentimental. She stroked the dog's ears. But you, she continued, a small smile tugging at her mouth, you reminded me that sometimes survival isn't about giving up what hurts. It's about fighting for what matters. Daisy sighed, pressing closer. The farm didn't magically heal. The debts didn't vanish. The tractors didn't fix themselves. But the fear that had been eating Claire alive, the fear that she would make the wrong choice and only realize it too late, had quieted. Because when she'd been standing at that edge, pen in hand, ready to step off a cliff she couldn't see, someone had stood in the way, someone with 4 paws and a stubborn, unshakable heart. Winter crept in slowly, dusting the fields in frost. The farm fell into its quieter rhythm. Fewer tractors, more wood smoke, the steady crunch of boots on frozen ground. Little by little, life rearranged itself. One morning, Claire sat at the kitchen counter, staring at an email on her cracked laptop screen. Dog-assisted programs for rural youth, the subject line read. The message explained that a regional nonprofit was looking for small farms willing to host weekend programs for at-risk kids from nearby towns. Places where they could learn to care for animals, grow food, feel the ground under their feet. We heard about Daisy's story, the director had written. We believe she could be an incredible therapy dog with the right support. Would you consider partnering with us? We offer stipends to help cover expenses. Claire read it twice. When she looked up, Daisy was watching her from the doorway, as if she'd been listening. It wasn't what Claire had pictured when she'd imagined saving the farm, but it was something else she hadn't imagined, either. A way for this land to keep growing life, not just crops. A way for Daisy's courage to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their fence line. By spring, the program had begun. On Saturdays, a battered van rattled up the dirt road, spilling out kids with nervous eyes and guarded shoulders. Some had never seen a cow up close. Others had never walked across a field without sirens in the distance. Daisy greeted each one with equal seriousness, tail wagging, nose sniffing, body relaxed but watchful. There was the boy who flinched at every sudden sound, until Daisy lay down beside him in the barn, leaning her weight against his side until his breathing matched hers. There was the girl who refused to touch the soil, arms folded tight, until Daisy pawed at a patch of earth and looked back at her, tongue lolling, as if saying, "Your turn." 10 minutes later, both of them were digging holes for tomato seedlings. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the barn's high windows, Claire watched a group of kids brushing Daisy's fur, their laughter humming through the dust motes. "Some hero you've become," she murmured. Daisy's eyes met hers. In them, Claire saw the same thing she'd seen on the courthouse steps. Focus, awareness, a deep, steady love that nothing could rattle. Only now. The danger wasn't hidden in a briefcase. It was in the invisible weight those kids carried. And Daisy was facing that, too. Later, sitting on the porch after the van had pulled away, Claire opened her journal. A habit she'd picked up on a therapist's suggestion, she wrote, "Today, Daisy saved more than just a farm. She helped a boy smile for the first time in weeks. She stood beside a girl who'd forgotten what it felt like to be safe. She reminds me every day that this land is still alive, and so am I. The sky above the fields glowed with the same golden light she'd once planned to leave behind. Now she saw it differently, not as something she was trapped in, but as something she was entrusted with. Daisy shifted closer, head on Claire's knee. "You gave me a second chance," Claire whispered. "Now we get to give that to other people." The dog's tail thumped softly against the porch. In the distance, the wind rustled through the dried corn stalks, carrying the faintest echo of a promise. They would face storms again. There would be hard years, late notices, sleepless nights, but she wouldn't face them alone. Not anymore. Months later, a small camera sat propped on a stack of seed catalogs on the kitchen table. The email from the nonprofit had asked if Claire would record a short message for their annual fundraiser. "Just talk about Daisy," they'd said, "about what she's done for you and the kids." So she did. The red light blinked on. Claire looked into the lens, then down at the dog sitting proudly beside her, white chest gleaming against black fur. "You know," she began, her voice steady but soft, "growing up, I thought dogs needed us more than we needed them. We feed them, shelter them, give them a place to belong." She smiled faintly. "But somewhere along the way, I realized it goes both ways. Sometimes, we're the ones lost in the storm, and they're the ones who find us." She rested a hand on Daisy's back. "This dog," she continued, "stopped me from making the biggest mistake of my life." She saw the danger in a friendly handshake. She felt the lie behind a polished smile. "She stood in the doorway when I was about to walk through it and lose everything my family had built, everything my father had worked for." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away from the camera. "She didn't do it with words," Claire said. "She did it with a growl, with a bark, with a paw pressed firmly in my path. She did it because love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it stands in your way and refuses to move until you see the truth." Daisy leaned against her leg, eyes half closed, content. "Now," Claire added, "she spends her days helping kids who've been through storms of their own. She walks beside them in fields they've never seen before, shows them that the world can be quiet and safe and kind. She teaches them, and me, that trust can grow again, even after it's been broken." She drew a slow breath. "They don't speak our language," she said, voice dropping to a gentle cadence. "But they understand our silence. They sense the danger we're too busy or scared to see. They stand between us and the edge, even when we're convinced we know better." The camera zoomed in slightly as she reached up and held the worn leather collar at Daisy's neck, thumb brushing the metal tag. "She's not just my dog," Claire finished softly. "She's my guardian, my family, my angel on 4 tired farm dog paws." The video would go out to donors and strangers who'd never set foot on Hartley soil. Some would watch and move on. Others might feel something stir. A memory of a dog they'd once loved, a quiet companion they'd taken for granted. And maybe, somewhere, someone standing at the edge of their own invisible cliff would remember Daisy. Remember the farm dog who refused to let her human step through the wrong door. And they'd look down at the faithful eyes beside them and think, maybe I should listen. If Daisy's story touched your heart, if you've ever had a silent guardian who stood between you and a mistake you couldn't see, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share it. Tell someone about the dog who saved you in ways no one else noticed. And if you'd like to walk with more stories like this, stories of ordinary animals doing extraordinary things, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because here, at Pawprints of Valor, we believe something simple and profound. Not all heroes wear medals. Some leave muddy paw prints on our floors and courage in our hearts,